I did not transition from anything to anything. I am an artist, a Ugandan, but an artist that's conscious enough to be concerned about where I'm coming from as a person and where we are coming from as a nation and where we are going.
Fairly often in Uganda, we hear news about the artist who's challenging the country's president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, who's been in office for the past 34 years. Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, popularly known as Bobi Wine, has become a symbol of revolution for many young people in Uganda. According to the World Population Review, over 70% of Uganda's 44.7 million people are under the age of 25.
I like to mention that since President Museveni took power and promised that he and his team would lead Uganda for only 4 years and return power to civilian rule, when many Ugandans realized that that was a lie, I mean, I was still a young boy, resistance started against Museveni. So Ugandans have been resisting the excesses of President Museveni. Even when I was deeply involved in my music, like Fela said, when I was busy teaching my generation nonsense through my music, you know, I was one of the artists that were mentally sterile. I was not conscious, well, I might have been a little bit conscious, but it was not to the levels that were required. So I cannot give credit to this resistance to myself. You notice that we have an opposition leader called Dr. Kizza Besigye, who was a personal physician of Museveni, but came out to stand against him. You know, there's a general called General Mugisha Muntu, who was the first army commander under the Museveni regime. He also came out to denounce the dictatorial tendencies of President Museveni. So I am not the first person. I just came in, first of all, because I knew that I had a role to play. And most importantly, because I noticed that the young people of my generation had basically neglected their historical responsibility of standing and being counted, well knowing that all over the world, transformations and revolutions and nations have been changed and built by the young people of that time. So it was my historical call to the young people of Uganda and indeed the young people of East Africa and Africa as a whole to take responsibility and to answer the call of history to rise to the occasion and take part in the governance of their country. That's when I came in. I know that I've gone quite through a lot, but again, I cannot compare that to what people silently go through. I mean, you must have been reading on the news, young men and women kidnapped by the military and the police. Recently, a fellow artist called Bobi Wine was kidnapped by the security forces, tortured gravely, his eyes removed out, and killed. So many people have gone through so much.
In 2017, Bobi Wine ran for a seat in Parliament as an independent candidate and won over the top politicians. This time, he intends to unseat the president, Museveni, who has been in office since he was 3 years old. What are his hopes for winning this election?
I know that very many people are skeptical about challenging President Museveni. Many people have actually given up on hope of democracy, and many are suggesting that we take up arms against him. But as a person and as a leader, I don't believe in violence. Museveni took up guns in 1980, and by 1986, 500,000 Ugandans had died. It costed 500,000 lives for Museveni to become president. It is not worth it for me. However, I'm also aware that the times are not like they used to be. We as young people are 85%. The numbers are in our favor. And it should be noted that even the elders are very strongly behind our cause. But that said, I also know that from history, dictators have always been one. Look at the Gambia, where there was Yahya Jammeh. He was defeated democratically. We have seen people like Omar el-Bashir of Sudan and Bouteflika of Algeria. They had more equipped armies, more organized, but guess what? They are no more. So, yeah, the people prevailed. So like we are told by great leaders like Mandela that it always seems impossible until it's done.
His activism has not come at little cost. Since last year, he's been arrested several times and continues to face various consequences as he speaks against laws that he thinks reduce self-expression for the common people in the country.
The Public Order Management Act, otherwise known as POMA, is an old colonial law, the law that prevented black people from coming together. Now in Uganda, it is a crime for 4 people to come together. And if 4 people must meet to have a discussion, a conversation, or even a coffee, they must seek permission from the Inspector General of Police. Now that's ridiculous. Of course, that law is not applied on all people because it is okay for thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people to come together and get drunk and dance and do anything else. But if 4 or 5 people came together to discuss the future of their country, then police and military police and other outfits of security will fall in to despise and torture them. Even when the police claims that they need to be notified, yes, the law, much as I disagree with that Public Order Management Act, I disagree with that law, but I'm a law-abiding citizen. I know that law has been challenged in the courts of law, but you know, since the courts are in the pocket of President Museveni, that case has not been heard up to today. That law provides that somebody only needs to notify the police. But even when we notify the police, we are not allowed to gather. So it's basically fear from the dictatorship. We did not show up because we have a lot of experience. Personally, I'm not into this because I have so much knowledge in politics or so much experience in politics or the military. I'm into this because I'm desperate for freedom. We are into this because we want better. We want a better country where we matter. To begin with, we want to matter. We want our voice to be heard. So it does not matter whether I'm a border rider or I'm an artist or an educated young man or woman or an Okada rider. No, what matters is that we are Ugandans and we are just as worthy as anybody else. We are ghetto youths, but it's on our backs that the economy is built. We are the ones that work. We want all the policies to be favoring the people. And if that is decided by a vote, then we are going to use our vote to decide that. As simple as that.
You're breaking my hand.
All the dictators, and mainly in Africa, seem to be reading from the same playbook. Sadly enough, they only read the middle, they don't read the ending, because the ending has always been the same. Oppressed people have always prevailed over their oppressors. When I look at myself, I don't see anything different or anything special about me. Whatever I'm doing, people have done in even greater magnitudes. Whatever I'm talking about, Fela talked about extensively. Whatever I'm doing, people have done, those that are known and those that are not known. I think I, all together with the people we work with, I think we as a generation are just fortunate that we represent an idea whose time is so ripe. I rise in a time where Ugandans are oppressed to the point where they cannot take it anymore. It has been 34 years. I rise at a time when Uganda and indeed Africa has the youngest population in the world, a very widely connected population, informed population. So all these that you see are very many factors coming together. And myself, I'm only just one of the minor factors that fit into this. You know, it is more like a choir. It's like a choir where there's bass and alto and tenor and all these other beautiful voices. Or like a band where ultimately the band leader or the guy that stands in front of the band takes all the attention and the credit, but indeed a collective effort of people that do it deliberately and others do it unknowingly. It is nature bringing all this together.
Well aware of the possibility of being overtaken by power, like men before him, Bobi has a strategy to keep himself and the leaders of his generation in check.
Young African leaders rising up, it gets me very hopeful and optimistic, but does not excite me. Why don't I get excited? Because I know Africa has been here before. We have had a generation of the great Sajefo Kwame Nkrumah. We've had Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. We've had leaders like President Museveni, like Robert Mugabe. These are leaders that at one time were described as the new breed of African leaders. These were prized revolutionaries. And when you look at what they were saying when they were my age, oh, it's amazing. However, we all know what they turned into, because we know that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. However, I am convinced that the future of Africa lies in the entire populations. All we have to do is not to empower these individuals, but to empower the masses, to be able to hold them accountable, to establish and empower institutions so that we don't have big daddies anymore. Our undoing as Africa has been the rise of powerful individuals, that these individuals became the state, they became the law, they became small gods of sorts, and before you know, the corruption that is inherent in mankind kicks in. Uganda and indeed Africa can rewrite this narrative first and foremost by re-educating our people, not formally, but making them know that indeed this is their home, they own it. All the people that have been able to change their countries and their communities, they did that in their youthful years. It is the youth that work, it is the youth that pay taxes, it is the youth that fight in the armies, it is the youth that vote. So it should be the youth to shape their nations, and the rest will be details.
I would like to communicate, but the things that we have to eliminate, ignorance and poverty to eradicate, and the whole I get to use them to educate.
Wine has a long history with humanitarian services, long before his involvement in politics, from projects to sanitize hospitals and public spaces, to funding for disadvantaged people. He has worked on courses that promote healthy conditions that give hope to his people. We asked him to paint a picture of a perfect Uganda.
Wow. Would you allow me to sleep and dream? The Uganda of my dreams is a free Uganda. A Uganda where one cannot be arrested, beaten or tortured because of what they believe or because of what they think. We want to live in a Uganda that where to get a job or an appointment anywhere, it does not depend on your last name or the shape of your nose or your height or your tribe or where you come from. We want to live in a Uganda that is democratic, where the people decide, where everything is done for the benefit and on behalf of the people, where the people reign supreme and the leaders are but servants of the people. We want to live in a Uganda where the natural resources of the country are used for the benefit of the people, where a president cannot say my oil, my gold, my army. We want to live in a country where the army is truly subordinate to civilian authority. That's the kind of Uganda that we want to live in, where a ghetto child like myself can stand and confidently say, I am only limited by my hard work. There's so much that we envisage in the future, but realistically, we have a very challenging present to deal with. I know that in civilized countries, in well-governed countries, people organize along political parties. But again, we must be alive to the fact that we are under a military dictatorship where not even political parties are allowed to organize. The young people of Africa are not too young to think for themselves. They are not too young to write their own history. If we don't do that, our futures are going to continue being decided and shaped by people that are not going to be part of those futures, because the people that are deciding our futures now are surely not going to be around to face those futures. So we better lay our bed well knowing we're going to lie in it.